Good Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for hopping on NCSA Live. I'm David Kamisik, Senior Recruiting Manager with Next College Student Athlete. Appreciate you spending part of your Tuesday afternoon with us. As we do every week, we're going to hit on a specific topic here in the recruiting process, dive into some in-depth stuff. Today, we're going to talk about social media use for college recruiting. We're going to dive into how athletes should use social media, creating an athlete social media profile that will attract college coaches. What are good things for athletes to post? What shouldn't they post, maybe? And ways that athletes can interact with college coaches on social media. As always, we want you guys to be participating in this. So if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about, jot them down there at the bottom of whatever your page you're watching us on, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We'll get to as many as we can here over the next half hour. I've got two very intelligent and good-looking gentlemen joining me. To my left is John Puglisi. You're right. John Puglisi, former college basketball coach, working with our team edition, a lot of our college club coaches, I should say, and then Philip Wells, one of our recruiting managers as well. How are we doing this afternoon, gentlemen?
Doing very well. Now that we got that left and right, our directions the right way.
I'm looking one way, I'm pointing another. It's confusing.
You got it.
Right on. We're ready to go. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, of course. So let's dive into it. So Philip, let's start with you. Social media obviously is a huge part of the world these days. Facebook and I think Instagram went down for a few hours yesterday, and people were probably lost, not knowing what to do with themselves. But social media is an important piece in the recruiting process as well. It's not necessarily the means to, the end way to get recruited. It's not, create a social media page and you get recruited. It's part of it. It can help you in the recruiting process. But let's first talk about how can athletes utilize social media? What should they be doing? How should they be using social media to their advantage in the recruiting process?
Absolutely. Very, very vital part of the recruiting process. As we've seen, again, online technology, social media has become a really big part of a lot of things. Really possesses a lot of different parallels. But when it comes to student athletes engaging in the recruiting process, number one thing is to be visible. As far as a student athlete goes, you want to have some kind of social media presence. You want to be visible online to make it easier for college coaches. Remember, they have to recruit you. College coaches have to evaluate. And if you can make it easier for those coaches, that's going to increase your likelihood of becoming a recruitable student athlete towards that given program. So amongst being visible, we're not saying that if you're usually not super active on social media, you have to turn the switch and all of a sudden be extremely active. But at the very bare minimum, we have to be aware. College coaches are absolutely going to track everything that you have on social media, or at least make attempt towards it. While actually tracking things, don't share anything that a college coach probably wouldn't need to see. Okay, you want to be very aware. You want to very much keep some identity amongst yourself on the positive manner when it comes to college coaches and what they can see. They will be looking. Outside of that, as a student athlete, use your resources. Use your resources. College coaches are buzzing around social media to really gauge character, to gauge some of the recruiting material they need for proper evaluation. Use your resources. If you have a club coach that you have actual side practices with, if you have a personal trainer, if you have some kind of extracurricular activity, tag them in your social media accounts. Increase your likelihood of getting seen by a college coach by extending your presence to multiple facets. Again, heightening your likelihood of being seen by a college coach. The other aspect of it is really just making sure you're being active. Okay, being active amongst social media. It's really important that a college coach can dive in and see that, hey, you've recently shared some video. You recently shared your schedule. You recently shared as a student athlete something that's going to bring that college coach a little bit closer to evaluating you personally. Really important. And I would say the last thing is making sure the content that you do share is relatable. A lot of different things we can do as student athletes when it comes to our top schools, when it comes to coaches that we're following. Put that on your social media. If you're looking to target a certain program, look at that program on social media, and you might want to tag them in a certain post that you have. It makes it a whole lot easier if a college coach is evaluating you and they actually see your social media presence and it's relative to their program or it's relative to what they're looking for out of potential recruits. That heightens, again, your likelihood of being evaluated by a college coach. So big time in reference to being strategic with some of the things that we do on social media.
Yeah, John, I want to bring you in here. Obviously, the recruiting process I touched on, having a social media page can be helpful in the recruiting process, but it's not going to be your be all end all of getting recruited. So how can a student athlete use social media but supplement it to the other things they're doing in the recruiting process? You being a former college coach, what were you looking for as a coach? What was things that you saw on someone's social media page that was helpful versus stuff that maybe detracted you from recruiting somebody?
Yeah, I think one really important piece to what you're talking about, David, is why you use social media. I think the one thing to remember is everything that you put on social media is going to get looked at by any college coach as long as your information is public. And so what you post is really important. I think there's a couple things to keep in mind. If you're using Twitter, if that's a primary source of social media that you're using, what do you have in your bio? What's your grad year? Do you have a link to your recruiting profile with NCSA in there? Have you pinned your most recent highlight tape or skills video? Those kinds of things are really important for you to have on your social media. And those will go a really long way to identification for college coaches. One reason that we use social media is, like Phil said, which is such a great point. But one reason that college coaches use it is to gauge character. What are you posting? What are you liking? What are you retweeting? That kind of stuff matters. So if this social media account is one that you're going to use for recruiting purposes, then please only use your social media for recruiting purposes. Have another Twitter account that hides, that's private, that just, you're following certain friends, family, things like that. But I loved what Phil said just about what type of information to provide your camp or tournament schedules, your high school schedule, the teams that you play on, those people you may train with or work with on the side. Those kinds of things will go a long way, because as a coach, the one thing I'm doing is I'm putting your name into Google and seeing what pops up right away. If your Twitter account, you have one, that's going to pop up in my initial search, and I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to see what you're liking, what you're retweeting, what you're posting, because it is a piece to the identification tool. But on a bigger scale, do you fit my program? Do you fit my brand? And that's why I'm using it as a college coach. We see tweets all the time from college coaches that say, stopped recruiting a player because of what they had on their social media. That happens. So be really careful with what you put. You can use this to your advantage. And college coaches are going to be looking just as simple as, let me run a quick Google search.
Yeah. And talk about the college coach aspect. I think that's an important piece as
Yeah.
well. So many schools now have used social media as pretty much an advertising or marketing opportunity for their program. And it's a great thing for student athletes to be up on not just the college coaches, but the athletic program, right? I'm a Marquette grad. I follow Shaka. I follow Marquette basketball. Yeah. I follow the assistant coaches. And they're using this platform to promote their program. It's also a great way for student athletes to get to learn more about the program or a certain program, or maybe interact with that school a little bit. Obviously, there's certain rules in place around social media and what coaches can do, but as important as it is for coaches to be following the kids and kids having the right information, student athletes can really find a lot out by looking at an athletic program or a certain coach and following them and keeping track of them.
Yeah. There's a couple reasons why college programs use social media. Every coach generally has their own social media account. Now, those coaches don't always run that social media account, so keep that in mind. A head coach at a Division I school in basketball or football may have a graduate assistant or a marketing manager actually running their account for them, so it's not going to be as personal. The program social media accounts, like you mentioned, like Marquette basketball, it's a great place to learn about that program, their fan experience, their schedule, the success of the team. If you're going to tag or follow, you can certainly follow programs that you want to find out more about, you're interested in, all that kind of stuff as a fan or as a recruit. If you're going to follow with the idea of tagging any coaches, be careful who you tag and how many you tag. If you're posting something and you tag every coach at the Division I level, that is a little extreme. But if you have a couple assistant coaches that maybe are recruiting you, well, those assistant coaches might be great people to tag in a new video or your schedule that's coming out. as a coach, I'm using it more as oversight than anything. As a student athlete, you can learn a lot about who these people are that are recruiting you and who that program is and what they value. But remember, and I think this is important for every student athlete to know, is those organizational accounts, like that's not Shaka Smart running a Marquette basketball Twitter account. So keep that in mind when you're looking at who you're going to be following.
No wonder Shaka's not responding.
Never gotten back to you, has he?
Wait, no, like, let's go. I'm excited.
He's never gotten back to you.
Cool. Philip, let's bring you back in here. I think one thing that's important is for student athletes to be posting, we talked about the right stuff on their social media account, but also being smart in terms of what they're, like retweeting. We see social media being used a ton now for kids, blessed to receive an offer from so-and-so, or excited to receive an offer from so-and-so, great conversation with so-and-so, and they're doing that. I think there's a level of humility that recruits need to have when they're doing this as well, in terms of not using that as a way to brag about themselves too much, but you still need to showcase some of your strengths and some things that are positives for you from a student athlete side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real fine line. We don't want to come across as arrogant as a student athlete. But college coaches, they need a sample size. College coaches need something to genuinely evaluate. And when it comes to our social media, posting things like our upcoming school schedule, our upcoming tournament schedule, our upcoming seasons schedule, that number one is a tool for a college coach when it comes to tracking your progression as a student athlete, game over game, year over year, tournament over tournament. Really, what we want to think about is just providing tools for college coaches to help out when it comes to evaluation. Things like school season. Okay, posting things like what's going on in the classroom. Did you just receive a couple rewards? Did we just actually get our transcript? Different things that we can post to engage college coaches into who we are as a recruit. That's going to be important. Even video. When we have updated video from a game that we just had this past weekend, when we have updated video from a tournament, we can post that kind of stuff. And when we really break it down, if we use Twitter, for example, those are the avenues where we want to post more things such as our transcripts. We want to post more things such as tournament schedules and different things that keep college coaches aligned. When it comes to more visual platforms such as Instagram, there is where we want our video. There is where we want just a recap of any tournaments we have. Keep college coaches in a loop visually with everything we're doing. And ultimately, we're going to have a natural bond almost formed within that college coach and that student athlete, even if it wasn't intentional, but just because you're strategically planning ahead with your social media to keep them in the loop. And all of a sudden, when it's time to reach out to that college coach, or when it's time for that coach, assuming the rules allow, for them to reach out to you as a student athlete, there can already be some rapport built upon their social media amongst yours as well.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is you want to shed yourself in the best light possible on social media, whether it's retweeting motivational quotes or retweeting a positive quote from someone else, posting something from your teammates, even, right? Not just what you're doing, but what are your teammates doing? We see that a lot as well. John, bringing you back in here. Obviously, the interactions that athletes and college coaches can have with social media, it's changed the NCAA rules. They've had to think about this a little bit more when it comes to the contact. So just talk us through, as a recruit, as a college coach, what can you do with social media? What can't you do with social media? Obviously, there are times where if you're DMing a college coach, depending on your grad year, that coach may not be able to respond. Let's talk about some of the NCAA regulations that social media has an impact with recruiting.
Yeah, so DMs are going to be treated like emails in most situations, right? So like if you're, depending on your grad year, your sport, you're going to have to follow those same rules. Most college coaches aren't going to respond to DMs or posts where you tag them. They're just not going to. There's times when they can, but they're generally not going to. Coaches now, and this has changed over the course of the last couple of years, can like posts that you put, especially if you're announcing an offer or a visit, a great visit to a school. I will just add this, David, because I think this is important. Humility is a big piece to it. One of the questions that college coaches will ask your high school travel club coach is who else is recruiting them. That happens often. And while as a high school coach or a travel club coach, we may not love that question. What it is doing is it's telling us as a coach, do our eyes match what they're hearing or who they're hearing from? Are our competitors interested in this student athlete? One way that you can drive some action in recruiting is to be very real and be honest, but explain, post when you have a visit or an offer from a certain school, because what that's going to do is that's going to tell me potentially as a rival coach, hey, maybe I should take a look at this kid. If you have your highlight video, your skills video pinned to your Twitter, and I just saw that another team in my conference or someone who we play against is recruiting that student athlete, well, maybe I'm going to watch that video. Maybe I'm going to look at their NCSA profile. Maybe I'm going to reach out to their coach. So I do think it's important to know that just because you tag someone or DM someone, you're not necessarily going to get a response from them, but it can create a little bit of engagement. Maybe they'll dive into your Twitter account a little bit deeper. Maybe they'll see who you have offers from or where you've gone on visits. Now, I will tell everybody, make sure that those offers are very real. Make sure those visits are very real. If you just showed up on a college's campus and you just went and walked around, please don't thank them for a great visit when you just met with the admissions team, right? So keep that stuff in mind. But college coaches are going to use it for oversight. They're going to use it for identification. There are obviously rules that are going to prohibit them from talking to you, but there are some rules that have changed, and it's used more often now than it ever was, a decade ago or even 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's a way to build leverage as a recruit, right? If I see, like you said, if I'm a college coach and I'm kind of interested in somebody and I see that a fellow conference member has offered this kid, I might think, oh, maybe I should take a look at this kid again, right? So it is a way to kind of build leverage. And I think the theme here is you have to be very strategic with how you're posting, what you're posting. Like you said, be real with it, but also have a bit of humility to it as well.
I see it all the time, David, when someone announces an offer or a visit, and you'll see new followers come in. You'll see activity and new offers come in because of that existing offer. A lot of times, and maybe this isn't how it should be, but this happens. You don't get on someone's radar until you're on someone else's radar. So if you can get on someone else's radar and you can announce that, there's a way to do it with humility and with an honest approach. But there's nothing wrong with announcing an offer and thanking them for the offer. There's nothing wrong with saying you had a great visit somewhere, and that can drive some engagement from some other programs.
Yeah, we see that where the kid gets his first D1 offer, and then all of a sudden the next week, 3 or 4 or 5 other schools he gets D1 offer from. And even I think utilizing third parties too, right? Where you have these recruiting networks that give the stars and that have all the offers, 24/7s of the world, retweeting some of that information too. Again, that's something that we see a lot, in the basketball world that you and I are certainly familiar with.
Yeah, and think about it from this perspective is in Division I, David, a lot of those offers and a lot of those visits, they're tracked by those different companies. But Division II, Division III, NAI, junior college, those aren't tracked as well as maybe those Division I schools. So if you're interested in schools at a certain level, you start getting some interest. Well, there's nothing wrong with you, throwing that interest out there that you have offers coming in, because other teams in that conference or in that region, they may not have seen you play. They don't have as big of a recruiting budget. They weren't at an event that another school was at where they identified, this other school identified you. Well, that school, maybe they weren't there. So here's a way to say, hey, I've got interest. I've got an offer from, school X. And that's something that, on the Division II, D3, NAI, and junior college side, it's not tracked as well. It's not followed as much as, like you said, the different recruiting companies that are out there that actually have those ratings and those national rankings.
Yep. Sounds good. Awesome. Philip, let's go back to you. The more student athletes that they can follow coaches, right? They can like stuff. There's a little bit more flexibility on the student athlete side, just like there is in the recruiting process, right? As a freshman in high school, I can email college coaches. So you can be proactive in liking these programs. But again, I think John brought up a good point. If you're using social media as like your main way of trying to connect with a college coach, you're probably missing the boat a little bit in terms of what that should be used for.
Absolutely. Again, it's not the say it all be all. It is a strategic way to heighten you on a prospect, heighten yourself on a prospect list. This is something to add a cherry on top to the recruiting process. It's not the say it all be all. And I want to just piggyback off John a little bit when it comes to the aspect of, again, DMing a college coach, knowing that you probably won't get a response right away, if ever. Know that a lot of that is not going unwatched. It's an old adage, and a lot of times it pertains to us as underclassmen, as student athletes. In a lot of ways in the recruiting process early on, you have to kind of walk by faith and not by sight. You have to trust that your efforts are actually for a reason. When you send out that message to a college coach, you got to trust that it's getting read. When you share something on your Twitter or your Instagram, whether it's an offer, whether it's an official visit, you got to trust that that stuff is building some traction. And again, floodgates open when you first get that interaction when it comes to college coaches. Coaches are looking to build championship rosters. You get an offer from another program, they're thinking, well, shoot, what are we missing out on as a program? Why are they interested in Little Johnny versus us? So again, very competitive in that aspect when it comes to the recruiting process as a whole. And if we can use social media as a catalyst, but not as the said all be all, it serves as a really good opportunity to actually bring college coaches a little bit closer. And remember, college coaches, they're figuring this thing out as well. You know, rules are changing in reference to how college coaches can interact with you on social media. College coaches are figuring out the best ways to react upon student athletes on social media, whether it's a result of the pandemic where we have to forcibly use social media a little bit more, or just a result of the trend of the technology world that we're in now, where college coaches can mitigate maybe some of the traveling. College coaches can mitigate some of the pain points they experience when it comes to the recruiting and evaluation process for them.
Yeah, and John, you work a lot with our club programs, travel programs. An interesting point, I think, is that a lot of times you're seeing these club programs try to utilize their social media as a way to show off, hey, these are the kids that I got in my program that are getting recruited. So that's a great way, too, to utilize them to kind of have somebody in your corner that's helping your social media presence as well.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're a high school, you're part of a high school football program, or whether you're on a travel softball program or a grassroots basketball program, your coaches probably are going to have some sort of social media following, and you can ask them to retweet your highlight videos, your skills video. You can ask them to retweet offers, or if an offer, they help you with that process, they can tweet out your offers or post your offers. Adding them in can go a long way, because you have to remember this as a student athlete. While there are times when you as a student athlete cannot have that connection with college coaches, your coaches, your high school, your travel club coach can always talk to a college coach. So you can always involve them in this process on social media or otherwise.
And I think, too, one last thing, John, for you is you have some old school coaches that don't use social media. So
Totally.
when I was in Madison covering the University of Wisconsin, Bo Ryan used to always joke, "Tweeter, what's this?" Right? So you still have some coaches that are still in the game that just don't utilize social media and kind of have that negative connotation as to what social media is, which can probably maybe hurt their program. But you're not going to attract everybody. There's some coaches that don't utilize it, and there's some programs that utilize it to the extreme and rely on that to be impactful for the program.
Oh, 100%. I think even right now, David, I think Greg Gard is the head basketball coach at Wisconsin. He's probably got, 10, 20, 30,000 followers. I don't think he has tweeted in years. So, to each his own. You will have members of the staff. You will have a marketing group that maybe runs those Twitter accounts. And again, like Phil said, it may not be seen, but you have to build that as much as you can. And you need to understand that, if you continue and you try to keep working it, the right person is going to see it, and that will go a long way in terms of identification and starting your process, just gaining some traction.
For sure. Awesome. Let's dive into some questions here. We got some good ones rolling in. Now let's start on the Facebook side. First question is from William. Great question here. What if a player doesn't use social media? Philip, if you have a player that doesn't use social media, it's not, again, the be-all, end-all. It doesn't mean you're not going to get recruited, but you'd have to be doing other things that you should be doing anyways, whether you use social media or not. But again, social media isn't the be-all, end-all when it comes to recruiting.
Yeah, just as we just touched on, some college coaches out there, may be rare nowadays, but there's some that don't use social media anyway. So not the end-all, be-all. We should still be taking a normal progression of steps in the recruiting process, like reaching out to coaches, making sure we have a target list of schools, again, emailing college coaches, assuming, again, you're of that targeted grad class. But even aside from social media, make sure you have an NCSA profile. Make sure you do have an online presence that's not necessarily revolving around social media, but you do need an online presence so college coaches can still find film, still find measurables, and still find key points to make sure their evaluation is clear.
Yeah, and again, being proactive obviously is certainly important with that as well. John, I'm going to toss to you for this one. Allison wants to know, is it okay to tag coaches as an underclass? We talked a little bit about the rules, the timeline. As a student athlete, you can pretty much do anything. It's just the coaches are limited in terms of what they can be doing based on your grad or based on your sport.
Yeah, Allison, I would just be specific in who you're tagging and why you're tagging them. You can always tag them. They may not respond to that tweet. They may not like or favorite that message. But you can definitely always tag them. But again, like, just be specific with it. Again, that the reason to tag someone is not to get interaction with them. It's so that, your information pops up. That's really the reason to tag somebody.
Cool. Next question we got coming in here is from Damien. John, I'm going to stick with you on this one as a former college coach. Do offers expire? So college coaches give out scholarship offers to student athletes. They'll expire at some point, but as a college coach, what's your timeline when you offer somebody or you extend a scholarship offer to a student athlete?
Every situation is different. I would say to keep in mind that offers definitely can expire. Some programs are going to offer multiple people at the same position and they only need one of them. And they may tell you, hey, the first person to take this, gets it. There's going to be a lot of times where coaches are going to say, hey, if you're not interested, we need to move on. Now, some of that depends on the level. Some of it depends on sport. In football, they may be recruiting multiple linebackers or receivers or cornerbacks in a single year, right? But maybe you're a quarterback. Maybe they only have room for one quarterback in the QB room. In basketball, maybe they only need one big, one center. And in softball, maybe just a middle infielder. So those can expire. You just the really important thing is to ask the question when that offer comes in. Coach, I really appreciate that you have offered me a scholarship. Can you tell me more about that scholarship? Because not all scholarships are created equal, and keep that in mind. There's very few head count sports, meaning that a scholarship is a full scholarship. Basketball is one of those sports. Those are full scholarships. But in other sports like soccer or softball or baseball, track and field, some of these other sports, those are partial scholarships. So ask the question, can you tell me specifically how much is this scholarship worth? Are you recruiting? Have you offered this scholarship to other athletes at my position or in my event? Do I have a time where you want me to make this official by? And keep in mind that a lot of scholarship offers may center around a visit. Some college coaches will wait until you visit to offer a scholarship, but they'll say, hey, we want you to come to campus. We want you to see it. Let's talk. And they'll sit you down and then offer a scholarship. Some scholarships come over the phone. So it's all dependent, but ask the questions. That's the only way you're going to know.
Yeah, depending on the sport, like you said, some coaches are only looking to bring in one player. So if they're offering 5 at the one position, the first person to say yes, then you're kind of out of luck a little bit. So again, ask the coach, how many other shortstops are you recruiting? What's your timeline? Again, coaches are used to those questions, right? It's not something they're unfamiliar with. It's not something that as a student athlete or a parent you should be afraid to ask. It's a very, again, logical question to be asking there. Got a couple questions from YouTube, so let's pull up one of these. So Joseph wants to know, should recruits create an account, whether on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., that focuses solely on athletic and academic accomplishments and or highlights? Philip, you touched on this. Why don't you dive a little bit deeper?
Absolutely. Again, we want to separate some of the personal things that we post that might not be suitable for a college coach. We want to leave our social media private for those instances. But regardless of the network, again, whether it's, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, create something individual and specific towards you as a student athlete. And on those social media platforms, there is where you will keep everything academic centric as well as athletic centric, making sure that when college coaches see that network, when they see that platform, it's almost an evaluation tool for them because they know in multiple different areas online, they can go to those areas and look to heighten their evaluation. So absolutely, make sure you create a specific social media platform catered to you as a student athlete?
Quick example, when I used to work in TV, I had my TV account and then I had my personal account. My TV account was everything that I needed for work. My personal account was everything personally. So very similar. Another question from Joseph on YouTube. He's got a couple good ones here. With social media, which is more better, John? Meaning athletes on multiple platforms, or should you focus on one? Is it, you want to spread the net out and get as many opportunities out there? Should you be having an Instagram, a Twitter, a Facebook, or should you really kind of focus on one? Probably better to kind of spread the wing a little bit.
Yeah, I think probably the most commonly used from a recruiting perspective is going to be Twitter. Just because the amount of information you can share, the links that you can share, what that looks like. If you want to have an Instagram account or a Facebook account, that's fine. But I think college coaches are going to go to Twitter more often than not. They're going to try and find more information on you there than they would on Facebook, which just isn't used as commonly, especially in the recruiting process, or Instagram. And the reason with Instagram is because of the links and some of that stuff that makes it a little bit more difficult to be able to click on it and see. So I would recommend Twitter if you're going to choose one. And I think that's just probably the best practice.
Cool. Brian Shaw, have a good question here. John, this is, I think, something that you talked about a little bit, so I'm going to come back to you for this one. But senior athlete posted offers, posted visits. Recruiting was cut short last year due to COVID, but there was interest from competing schools in the same conference that kind of came from that. Just talk a little bit more about leveraging some of that and how that can make an impact here, like Brian and Cheryl talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great thing. I think that's exactly why you want to post the offers and visits that you have, is because we all follow each other. The college community, while you have a lot spread across the country, is a very small, tight-knit community. So those schools, they see each other at the same events. They see each other at the same showcases or tournaments. They go to the same recruiting days. They'll stop by practice at the same time. And then they're going to be competing against each other during the season. So we all track each other's recruiting successes. And so we're going to dive in deeper into an athlete. And if it's a good fit for, the school next door, well, maybe it's a good fit for me. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is, but maybe it is. And I'm going to take maybe a closer look. So I love that that's the case. It's a great thing. Keep in mind that those offers that are coming in and what those offers actually mean based on your sport, because those aren't all created equal. I've worked at Division II schools that were fully funded, meaning we had full scholarships to give out. And then there's other schools in our league who are offering scholarships, but they're a quarter of what we're offering, or they're 15% or they're 50% while we have these full scholarships. So make sure you know what those scholarship means. And one of those schools probably is a great fit. So figure out which one that is.
Cool. A lot of good tips here on how to use social media. Obviously, it's important that athletes not solely rely on social media to get recruited, but when you use it properly, social media can obviously be an effective tool for athletes to contact coaches, show coaches what kind of recruit they are, gain attention from coaches maybe who weren't previously recruiting them. So there are a lot of positives to social media as long as you use it in the right way, and you don't solely rely on that to get recruited. It should be a step in the recruiting process, but if you're putting stuff on social media and hoping that that's the way that you get recruited, I think similarly to when kids post their highlight videos on YouTube, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of kids have videos on YouTube. A coach needs to know who you are first to then go to that social media platform, to go to YouTube to find some of that. It's a lot of good stuff there. So cool. As we do every week, we want to recognize some of our recent commitments. It was an exciting time for us to shout out some student athletes who use the NCSA network and found great opportunities. So Philip, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. Ariana, going over to Howard University, Ariana Montiel, huge congratulations to her. She's a rock star, obviously, if you can't tell from the action shot there, getting a quick scoop there in the softball realm. But quick backstory on Ariana. She joined NCSA back in 2019, obviously braved the storm through a pandemic as far as the recruiting process is concerned. Couple stats on Ariana. She logged into her recruiting profile just with different updates, keeping college coaches in tune, making sure college coaches can track her progress. She logged in over 200 times, right around 230 times. And if you take a look in terms of how Ariana showed her progression, every single year, up until yesterday, dating back to 2019, she uploaded film. She has 4 different videos on her recruiting profile, so college coaches can see, hey, these are the areas where Ariana's progressed. So really big stuff coming from her. And the last thing I wanted to note that really stuck out to me is just one line that she notated in her personal statement, again, located on her NCSA profile. She noted, and again, simple, short, sweet, but it stuck out. Softball has taught me to fight for what I want, to work harder in life, and to pursue my dreams. My dream is to play softball at the collegiate level. Short and sweet, but happy to say that Ariana has achieved that goal here coming up shortly and going to a really good program, D1 over at Howard University.
Impactful statement for sure. Let's head to the lacrosse field. We got Claire Oldford. John Puglisi, you were the first person at NCSA to reach out to this family. It just so happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
In 2018, they signed up. Claire's freshman year of high school, so they got an early start on the process. And Claire's heading from South Carolina, her home state, just down south a little bit. Stetson University Division I program. Philip, you know I like to quiz you on nicknames. Stetson's nickname. If you get this one, I'm going to be super impressed.
I think John's got it for us.
You got it?
With me today.
It's
Dave,
tough.
away.
The Stetson Hatters.
Hatters. Yes, the Hatters.
I had to look that one up. I didn't know that one, but congratulations to Claire heading there. And then I'm not even going to attempt to say this student athlete's name because I'm going to butcher it. But congratulations. I'm just going to call her Para. Can we do that? Miss Briegel, maybe. Tennis athlete from Pennsylvania. She is staying in state and be competing at Lafayette College Division I program in the Patriot League. John, you got a nickname for the Lafayette?
Leopards.
Leopards. There we go. So Philip, you better be taking notes. We're going to quiz you at some point later this year about all these nicknames of these schools that we're
Don't
going.
worry, I have a study session later with John, so he doesn't know about it yet, but don't worry.
John's got it down for sure. Awesome. Well, appreciate you guys hopping on. Again, a lot of great content, a lot of great information about social media, the impact that it can have in the recruiting process. Again, it's a helpful thing to have in recruiting, but do not solely rely on social media to get you recruited. You have to be proactive. You have to be reaching out to coaches, emailing coaches, get your NCSA profile built. They're giving people a lot of great information on our website at ncsasports.org. If you're looking for some more info, reach out to us. We can certainly connect with you regarding your student athlete and make sure you guys are on the right path for the recruiting process. So again, appreciate you tuning in today. Next Tuesday, Philip and Kyle are going to be back talking a little bit more just about the college application process, how that works in the recruiting process. Obviously, it's different when you're just a student applying to college versus being a student athlete. In that process, we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. Again, Tuesday, 2 p.m. Central. Every week we're here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter as well. So again, big thanks to John and Philip for all their help. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Big shout out to Tommy Myers and Jim Bro behind the scenes making us look good. We'll see you guys here hopefully back next Tuesday.